Well, congratulations tonight. It really is my special privilege to be here to congratulate the Foster School on 20 great years of this event. And it really is my special privilege as well to be here to honor three people that I really admire, Pat and Bruce and John. And so it is just really a treat to be here tonight. Well, I also have the special privilege of introducing Jamie Dimon. I have been very fortunate, as Bill said, 3 years ago to accept the job as chair of the Pacific Northwest for JP Morgan Chase. And so I really wanted to give you not a bio tonight because I know you all know who Jamie is and you have his bio in the program. I just thought I'd give you some adjectives that, from my experience in working with him, and I know my colleagues that are here tonight would probably say the same thing, is a couple of adjectives that come to mind, and I'll just quickly go through why I picked these adjectives. First of all, globally respected. Well, I don't think that I really do need to say much about that, but really just to say that Jamie, through his 6 years of leadership as CEO, but through the financial crisis, really did many of the right things. And one of the things that really, I think, was a good summation of the esteem he's held in, he's been named, and again this year, as one of Time Magazine's 100 most globally influential leaders. But the second set of traits that I think is even more important, I see Jamie as both a patriot and an optimist. And you're going to hear from him a little bit tonight. And I really have to say that as I observe him, he has a sense of optimism about our country, about our people, just people broadly across the world, but certainly in our communities across the United States. And that certainly comes across every day as the leader of our company. I think as a patriot, and again, he does things in the context of what's good for the country. And I think, again, that's a special trait of a leader. And I really see his eyes light up as an example when he meets with veterans, members of our military. And it really is something that's near and dear to his heart. The last term that I would use, and it's, I think, apropos for this event, the Distinguished Leaders event tonight, is inspirational. And he really inspires me, inspires all of us at JP Morgan Chase to do the right thing in our communities, this community and others that we do business, do the right thing, especially by our customers. And so I really do appreciate that. I've appreciated so much the support so that we can do the right thing here in the Pacific Northwest, which is such an important community to us. So with that, I would just like to say that, not only is Jamie Dimon a distinguished leader, he's just a great human being. So please welcome to the podium, Jamie Dimon.
Phyllis, thank you. Thank you, and welcome to all, and I appreciate being here tonight. Let me just start by saying that a bank only exists, like most businesses, because there's a client in front of a banker somewhere. That's whether you're a consumer client or a small business or middle market or corporation. And I came here several years ago under circumstances that weren't that happy for Seattle, which is the failure of WAMU. But we're thrilled to be here. I hope you notice we've been doing nothing but investing in this town, opening branches, adding business bankers, small business bankers, private bankers, trying to do more corporate business here, maintaining philanthropy. But the thing that we did, which is by far the best thing we've done here, is to find Phyllis. So I can't see you, Phyllis, but... And when you're a big company, it's important that in every community you do business, and every community around the world, that community think they're better off you having been there, and that you're bringing the best of what your company has to offer to that community, and that you're there for good. It's not a permanent thing. You're not going to buy or sell it. You're just going to continue building part of the community. And Phyllis, thank you for making that here and for making so many happy clients here. So I'm going to give you a slightly different point of view about America today, because I do listen to all the naysayers, and people are very depressed, and malaise and all that. So I just want to take a few minutes to tell you how I think about it. And I think that when you wake up every morning, it's good to remember these things. We live in the finest country on this planet, bar none. Okay, in the last month, okay, I've been to Beirut, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, London. I skipped Paris. They don't like me very much there. And you know, every time you go overseas, by the way, they're more optimistic in Asia than they are here. I mean, it's kind of nice to go there because things are growing, they're doing well, and things like that. But when you come back here, you realize immediately the following things. We have the best military on the planet, and we're going to for decades. Not even close. And if I could just take one moment, if you ever served in the military, just stand up 1 second so we can all recognize your contribution to this country. There you go. We have the best universities on the planet. In fact, still around the world, some of the best students come here to be educated. Now, one of the shames is we now make them all go back home. In the old days, we used to let them stay here and build their careers and dreams here, but now we make them go back home. And I found out recently that Microsoft built an engineering plant in Vancouver because they couldn't hire the kids who graduate with advanced degrees in American universities in Seattle. I personally think that's a shame and a bad idea to drive brains elsewhere. And you might notice, by the way, that Vancouver real estate is booming. Seattle is not. And there is a relation to those decisions that get made all the time. We have the best businesses on the planet. And I'm talking about large to small. Okay, the large companies that are in America, you cannot duplicate them. So and some are here, Boeing, Nordstrom's. But it's true for Microsoft, the best, they're most innovative. And what people forget about these big companies is we act like they're bad all the time. They are the most diverse. They invest the most capital. They are usually very entrepreneurial. They usually pay better. They give medical benefits. These are fabulous institutions. Yes, they make mistakes. They make mistakes like universities, military, and newspapers make mistakes. It shouldn't taint the whole organization. Big business and small business are not enemies, like you hear sometimes, like it's one or the other. They're symbiotic. So when Boeing builds a plant that puts 4,000 jobs in the plant, 20,000 other jobs outside of that plant to service it, usually small business, from low-tech to high-tech. And we act like they don't work together. They do work together. Boeing, I heard, has something like 40,000 vendors just to help build this beautiful Dreamliner you see here when you land. J.P. Morgan has 50,000 vendors, and we bank 2 million small businesses. So we have the best business on the planet. We have the deepest, widest, most transparent capital markets on the planet. It is not equaled anywhere around the world. And yes, maybe there are flaws there, but they're the deepest, widest, most transparent. And those are good things. We have the best rule of law. You don't spend a lot of time in this country worrying about corruption or whether you actually own an asset or not. I know some of you do business I do overseas. I'm not going to mention the countries. You're never quite sure. It's very complicated. Ownership doesn't mean what it means here. And now we have a polluted tort system, which we're going to have to do something about one day. But rule of law is excellent here. We have the hardest working, most entrepreneurial, innovative workforce in the world. And I'm not talking just about a Steve Jobs. I'm talking about embedded in your companies are these hardworking, ethical people. You go to almost any city in America, wake up in your hotel room at 6 a.m., open the curtains, and the roads are crowded as people going back to work. 110 million people go to work every day for private enterprise, 20 million for government, by the way. Of the 20 million, 15 million are teachers, police, and firemen. But the 110 million, most of them actually like their jobs. They like going where they're going, and maybe they're a little bit nervous. But if you look at this country, we have these exceptional things, far beyond what you find elsewhere. Why are we so damn depressed? Now, I personally believe that you're going to be surprised. I don't know whether it's going to be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, but I'll tell you a little story. When I graduated business school, I graduated Harvard Business School. When I graduated business school, the second-rate one somewhere in Boston, we read endlessly about Japan. Endlessly. You may remember we had recently had a terrible time in Vietnam. Our stock market had gone nowhere in 15 or 20 years. When I graduated, the prime rate was at 21.5%, inflation was 12%, and unemployment was 9.5%. And every magazine said American decline, the next century belonged to Japan. Now, obviously, that was wrong. So somehow we're in this little malaise. Now, I personally think we're in the malaise because we did it to ourselves. And so public policy recently, we had a chance, I thought we had a chance to turn it all around. And you may remember when Simpson Bowles came up with this way to cut $4 trillion and rationalize taxes and cut entitlements. I think if the United States government had pushed the button and accepted something like Erskine Ball's stock markets would have 5 or 10%, and people would have thought that America is back. You may remember Winston Churchill used to say about America, America will always do the right thing after it's exhausted all other possibilities. So after we exhausted that possibility, we had this demoralizing debt ceiling crisis. We've got gridlock in Washington. But I remind you about gridlock in Washington, too. It is not the first time. It has been this bad before, particularly like after the Civil War, where Americans were killing each other. And so if you look at American history, there have been these times of, of distress, malaise, and things, but it always got better. There have been decades where America didn't grow. There's never been 20 years where America didn't grow. We grew past the Civil War, we grew past the Depression, we grew past World War I, we grew past World War II, we grew past Vietnam in 1982, and we will again. Bless you, and I'll welcome up my guests to come up and join me up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for those opening comments. And I'd like to also thank my faculty colleagues and our Foster MBA students for contributing to the development of the questions that I'm going to ask you tonight. So taking off where you left off, you've talked about the fact that perhaps we're in a malaise. Perhaps individuals are depressed. The Gallup organization that conducts a poll every year and asks the American public about how much they trust and have confidence in various institutions tells us that there are certain professions that we very much trust, such as the military. We also trust nurses quite a bit. Now, business professionals, we are in the bottom third. And so as you view and think about the institution of business, what do you think that business leaders can do to enhance the trust of the American public?
Yeah, so, first you have to diagnose the problem a little bit here, which is we spend a lot of time denigrating just about everything. I'm not blaming the press, by the way, because I don't want to blanket them with the same brush that we all get blanketed with. There are great businesses, there are bad businesses, there are great newspaper writers, there are terrible ones, there are great. There are some bad people in the military. There's some bad people, and somehow business just gets constantly attacked. I think you should acknowledge when you make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So, my first thing is you make a mistake, acknowledge it, fix it, do something about it, but don't pander to the bullshit that you hear from people all the time. I think that's a tremendous mistake. Get up every day, do the best you can, tell the truth, fight every day. I put the jersey on a J.P. Morgan every single day, and if we make a mistake, we should admit it. And we admit it to the press all the time, and so I'm not sure there's a great solution for it. But if you read American history, this has been going on for a long time. This is not the first time that business was, not loved by the American public.
So as a follow-up to that, in your particular business, in the banking industry, has been, one could say, disproportionately attacked. Mm-hmm. The media has talked about the fact that there's been an issue of legitimacy, that the banking industry has perhaps lost its legitimacy in the eyes of the public. So how do you regain legitimacy for such an important institution? What can leaders in that industry do? Okay,
so I think if you said that the financial industry in general was disproportionately attacked and disproportionately being blamed, well, they kind of deserve blame disproportionately, right? So if you look at what happened in America, you got to say part of the problems were kind of whatever you mean by Wall Street, because everyone means something different by Wall Street. That is not the same thing as saying that everyone on Wall Street did something wrong. Mm-hmm. So that's where I object to people saying, okay, we're going to blanket everyone with the same brush. Seattle isn't good. No, honestly, there are great people here, just like there are great people in New York. And so I don't buy the argument when people talk about whole industries like that. Mm-hmm. I just tune it out. I'm really not interested. That those people who generalize like that, just right off the bat, are doing the wrong thing, in my opinion. So there are great people in Wall Street. There are great institutions. And so what I've heard endlessly about Wall Street, for example, like our banks lending, like we put this in our press release, small business loans at J.P. Morgan were up 71% year over year. That's an unbelievable number. We put it right in the front of the press release. You didn't read about that anywhere. Nowhere. We've hired 13, I hear the protesters, 13,000 people in the United States last year net, including 2,000 veterans. We didn't read about that anywhere, so we've got to go tell our story a little bit better, clearly, and and again, like I said, when we make mistakes, admit that we make mistakes.
Thank you. So let's change gears a little bit. Who do you look up to? Who's been a leader in your life that has changed the way you see things?
I would point out that I do agree, like if you talk about, there are a lot of people on Wall Street, not just Wall Street, but on Wall Street, who made a lot of money, their companies fell apart, and they obviously didn't deserve the money, and people are mad about it, and I agree with that.
Okay.
Totally. That money, if there were ways to claw it back, and we had some of these better compensation policies before, like no change in control, no stuff like that, but that is a legitimate anger. Mm-hmm. So when I look at things, I say, well, yeah, if I was on the board, I'd be mad too. And so there are reasons that people can look at and say, this wasn't right, and we should do something about it. So inspirations in my life?
You got enough of that. I'm wondering who's been a central figure in your life in terms of leadership, because you have a very strong perspective, and who's helped shape that?
Yeah. So my father used to say, he's still alive, he still says, remember, when they write history, they really write about business people. And so I think if you actually ask me the most inspirational things that I read about are historical figures like Abe Lincoln. It always reminds me, when you read about his history, the ups and downs the man had, what he endured, how many elections he lost before he won the presidency, how many kids he lost, and what he had endured during the Civil War. And then a man like Nelson Mandela, who was in prison for 27 years, comes out of prison, and instead of being angry and causing what most people thought was going to be a civil war that would tear South Africa apart, brought it together. So there are people who've transcended the worst of all things. I think the measure of a lot of people is how they act in bad times, not how they act in good times. The other one is Abe Lincoln used to say the measure of a person isn't, you learn a lot about them like when you're in a foxhole with them, but you really learn about them when they have power. That people tend to misbehave when you give them too much power. That's when you should watch them very closely. So, but historical figures like that. On the business side, I actually learned from watching a lot of people, how they run meetings, what they do, how they, if you read what Warren Buffett writes or how people run their companies, I kind of try to learn by looking at everybody who's good out there. There's no one person I'd put above all others.
So building on that, it seems like some of the figures that you admire are ones that have been especially adept at dealing with times of change and crisis. And you've been through a roller coaster ride, one would say, in the past 4 or 5 years. Now, change and crisis is something that every leader in this room will have to deal with. What advice would you give us as to how to successfully and appropriately deal with those challenging times of crisis?
Yeah, I guess you're not going to be prepared for crisis if you have been doing it wrong beforehand. Okay. And so, like when people look, if you look like an Abe Lincoln, he was vilified at the time, but he stuck true to his beliefs. He didn't waver every time. He didn't do Paul's. He knew what he believed already, and he was going to get up every day and stick to those principles, his guiding principles. And so in a crisis, I think the only thing you do really is you give it more effort. You better already have the reporting, the people, the principles, the thing in place. It's too late afterwards. You're not going to be able to say, okay, we're having a crisis, now we have to change. It's like you have to exercise, be in shape, weed the garden, and then you're ready for the crisis. You can't change all of a sudden. So.
Although we all try to do that.
Yes, I know.
So when you've talked before about being in times of crisis, you've emphasized the need to surround yourself with truth tellers, individuals who give you that objective perspective. Mm-hmm. But you've also spoken a lot about optimism in terms of how you view the U.S. and our history and our future. When crisis is bad, and I mean when the situation's dismal, which I'm sure you've encountered before, how do you balance truth-telling with optimism?
Yeah. So I was at a thing one day, and a lady came up and gave a speech and said, you should always have at least one truth teller at your table among your management team. I got up and said, I agree with that, but if you have 10 people reporting to you, and one is a truth teller, you're in trouble. I mean, you should strive to have everyone being a truth teller. These are tough jobs. They pay a lot of money. You can't afford to have the BSers. Now, the optimism part, sometimes I give the most depressing speech, and what I say is depressing, and people afterwards say, that was optimistic, because my demeanor is more optimistic than, my attitude is the tougher it gets, the harder I'm going to work. That's all. I put on the suit every day. I'll do it at 7 or 8. If we got to do it 24/7, we'll go 24/7. So that's my general attitude. But when I hear, this is one of the things that bugs me now, when I hear about, and I think why we have a little bit of malaise out there, you could tell the truth and be optimistic. So sometimes I hear leadership in the United States of America saying things like, and I'm not talking about any particular person, so don't read anything into this, I know you're going to, but saying things like, whoa, it's going to be really tough out there. This was a long time coming to this problem. It's going to be a long time coming out. Wasn't my fault. Didn't start it. And you're going to be fighting a real tough battle against a real tough enemy out there. And there may be a lot of casualties, but not my fault. But I want to be honest with you and let you know it could be long and tough. That's really great. What they should say, and the military example is, folks, you are going to fight a battle-hardened enemy. That's the truth. But you have the best training, the best equipment. We shall prevail, so help us God. As opposed to the whining crap you hear all the time. And so that's all. But I would never, ever advise deceiving people. Never. Optimism does not mean you're not telling the truth about problems you're facing.
And I think as a final question, what have you learned about our political system over the past 4 or 5 years? And as a follow-up to that, do you have any political aspirations? And if so, what are they?
Listen, I always tell people when they ask me if I have political aspirations, have you heard me speak a little bit here? I mean, come on. I'm not suited for politics, and
it's a new America.
I have to confess, some of you know politics better than I do, and believe it or not, even though I've been in regulated business my whole life, I never spent a lot of time in Washington. And I did because of this crisis and that, and they called me down for this TARP meeting where they had the 9 bankers lined up, and they wanted us to take this money and stuff like that, and some of the banks clearly didn't need it. Some of the people in the room said, they said, you're going to take $10 billion, you're going to take $15 billion, you're going to take $25 billion, and here's how we calculate. We know you all don't need it, but we want you all to take it. Because that way it'll be good for the system. We get 700 other banks to do it. It'll stabilize the system because it's in the interest of the United States. So 2 or 3 people on my right, by the way, said, I'll take it. But I said, I got to call my board. And I called my board, and there's some people on that board with much deeper experience in Washington than me. And we agreed unanimously it's the right thing to do. It isn't right for J.P. Morgan. In fact, you could say it was asymmetrically bad for J.P. Morgan, but if it's good for the country, it's good for J.P. Morgan. We shouldn't stand in the way of what the government was going to try to do. But one of the directors, I remember saying to me, but beware. If you take government money, when we take this government money, the second you take it, your world will change. And I had no idea. It became a scarlet letter. We signed a contract that night. The government came in a week later and completely changed it. I didn't realize that they can change whatever they want at any time. I mean, even though I do think we still have a great rule of law. And so about 6 months later, I wanted to get out of TARP so fast. About 3 months later, I was down in the White House, and I went to, the president was there, but Tim Geithner, Secretary Geithner I know, who was a friend of mine, I had written a $25 billion check. And I actually sent my secretary downstairs to get the $25 billion check written. And the teller just types it up like it was an everyday kind of common occurrence. And we had a lot of fun about how to deliver this check. My favorite was to put it on the seat on the G5 and to deliver it by airplane and chauffeur. And some people wanted cash dumped on the White House lawn. Some people thought we should take gold bars. But I walked in and I gave the check to Tim Geithner. It was not a real check, by the way. And but I'd written a letter, which I read to him later, and it said, the letter said, "Dear Timmy, we didn't know what to expect when we took this money from the government. And boy, are we right about that. We learned an awful lot with this experience. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. At the bottom it said, P.S. I want you to know that the whole time that you were lending us $25 billion, that J.P. Morgan Chase was lending you, the government, $200 billion, which is true. And because of that, I like to audit your usage of airplanes, dining rooms, hotels, and, Anyway, I forgot your question.
Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Well, that was a terrific dialogue, and thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Morella. But before we let you go, Jamie, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the impact you, Phyllis Campbell, and other executives at J.P. Morgan Chase are having on the services that the Foster School provides the community through its Business and Economic Development Center. And with us this evening is Michael Verschow. Michael, would you come up to the stage? Who's the director of our Business and Economic Development Center. Let's give him a round of applause. So J.P. Morgan Chase has been a leading partner in the great work Michael and the Business and Economic Development Center are doing around the region. Last year alone, this partnership produced 800 jobs in the Puget Sound area, and we're now expanding regionally to Vancouver, Portland, Spokane, and other areas to help small and minority-owned businesses operating in economically challenged areas. We're also excited to announce that the model created by BDC, with the support of J.P. Morgan Chase and their neighborhood Renaissance strategy, is being scaled nationally. It's providing a model for business schools and students across the country to help grow small businesses into large ones in economically challenged areas. For your outstanding support of the Foster School's Business and Economic Development Center, and with our great appreciation, we're very pleased to present you with a crystal husky dog, and hope you look at it and think fondly of the U dog.